Reddit, what is your greatest revenge story? Story 1. My toxic manager made my life hell, so I finally got her fired. I was desperate to join a new job after my husband and I were both laid off last year. I knew it would be a step down from what I was doing, but the manager and the team seemed great, and that part has not changed. However, since my manager Gary was so busy, he basically offloaded me to another manager, Jane. I was supposed to be the connection point between my team and Jane, but it quickly became Jane micromanaging me. She would ask me to work through lunch, cancel vacation days, call at 11 p.m. on weekends, and order me around on phone calls. She also made nasty comments about my weight and said I was big for my race. The list of personal slights was so long that it filled 3 pages. I would talk back to her and she did not like that, and that provoked her more. I only stayed because we needed to pay the bills. Finally, I had a mental breakdown on a Friday afternoon, after she yelled at me for something trivial about scheduling a meeting without including someone from her team who I didn't know about. I was dealing with a family tragedy and couldn't take it anymore. I told Gary about the situation with Jane, and he was sympathetic and not at all surprised considering half her team quit. He immediately offered to move me to a different team under him. I was thrilled. Well, turns out going to the new team didn't help. Jane continued to order me around from afar. When I ignored her emails, she came to my desk one day and started loudly talking about how I am not qualified for this role. Gary overheard and finally told her off, but the verbal abuse did not stop. After 2 months there, I abruptly wrote my resignation letter and stapled the list of Jane's derogatory comments and CC'd everyone. Gary offered a bunch of accommodations to try to keep me, but seeing how she was still provoking from afar, I said the only way for me to stay would be for her to go, and he did not have authority to let her go. Her manager was in a different country, and despite several HR complaints from at least 5 people, nothing was done. So I left, loudly and without shame, telling everyone exactly why I was leaving. Times were very bad for 3 months. There were nights we would eat slices of bread just so we could pay the mortgage and emergency expenses from a health crisis and a funeral. Even after he found a job, we were still catching up on bills and still are. I spent months applying to 5, 10 roles per day, sometimes over 20. Last month, I saw a public memo about a big shot from a former company joining the company I just left. I used to work with this guy closely and texted him a, "Congrats, let me know if you need any insights on the new place." We had a quick call where I told him some ins and outs, where I thought they could innovate. After this call, he asked me to join the team as his chief of staff. I accepted. Imagine Jane's shock when we had our first all-hands call. All the VPs and above were asked to welcome the new Big Shot in a giant conference room. In Big Shot's speech, he breezed over that I'll be his chief of staff, along with a few key names. I now sat 2 levels above Jane, and apparently, within the 3 months I was not there, the other half of her team turned over. Every single person left. Gary was excited for me and said all nice things. However, Jane took the classless route and sent Big Shot an email about how I'm an unqualified idiot, that I used to work for her, how I tried to get her fired, and that she suspects I lied to get ahead. She didn't even try to be fake nice. Big Shot forwarded me her email and asked what this was about. I was so nervous and excited. Little did Jane know I was a director at Big Shot's competitor company and was already a level above her, so 2 levels isn't a big leap, and I worked with him for 5 years. I had an hour-long call with Big Shot and told him she was bad for the company culture and was a nasty person in general, but the evidence he needed was right in front of him. He thanked me for my honesty and told me to ignore Jane from now on. The next day, Jane was called into Big Shot's office and fired on the spot. I walked by her desk as she was packing up her things and smiled. She glared at me and said, "You'll never be happy." I just laughed and said, "I'm already happier than I ever was with you." Story 2. I was 6 years old when I called my family crying, telling them that I knew something was wrong and that my mother didn't love me. My mother punished me for ruining her image by spinning a story to my family that I was a pathological liar who had been brainwashed by my grandmother to ruin her life. She effectively cut me off from my family and the outside world, making sure I had no internet or cell phone access until I moved out. She also prevented me from getting a job and tried to sabotage my efforts to get into college. I went through hell in that house. When I was younger, I retaliated in immature ways. But as I got older, I was very careful with how I talked to her. I only ever told her the truth. But because she had convinced herself that I was a pathological liar, she would think that anything I said was only intended to hurt her. If I said, "You should bring an umbrella today," It looks like rain. She would make a point of not bringing one to spite me, and then she would get caught in the rain. If a friend said something similar to what I said and was genuinely trying to help her, my mother would think that person was her enemy and remove them from her life. She only had nasty people in her life since she'd removed herself from everyone who cared. She called me looking for advice. LOL, right? She was basically going to fly across the country to go stalk someone, and I told her not to do that. He'll dislike her even more, and he could call the police. I got in touch with her dad and told him to try to stop her. She went because now she was convinced it would work. The poor guy was hiding in his workplace while she was outside crying for him to come outside. You can't say I didn't warn her. I hear she's in therapy now, but it doesn't seem to be working much. I can imagine why. It must be a very upsetting experience to have a professional tell you the same lies your pathological liar of a daughter told you. So basically, my revenge is just the fact that I'm now a solid believer in killing someone with kindness. Story 3. My first job out of college was for a local TV station. The owner was, and still is, the worst human being I've ever met. This guy had money, but he would cheat and lie anything to get out of paying his bills. When I started working there, the owner had just signed a contract with DirecTV to become part of their broadcast package. Since they were at the time purely a local TV station, this meant that we had about 2 months to upgrade our system so that we could start broadcasting to DirecTV customers in the entire Bay Area. Every day that we failed to do this past the deadline meant that the owner would suffer a penalty per the contract. Not knowing about how any of this works, the owner hired a friend of mine to come in as a freelance consultant. My friend told him that for about $15,000 he could get a system that would automate the entire process, which of course this guy didn't want to pay. He tasked my friend with finding a cheaper way, around half, and to pay for all the hardware up front and get reimbursed later. Knowing what a piece of work this guy was, I warned my friend not to front the money because he wouldn't get paid back. The guy just smiled and said, "Watch me." So he made it work, we went live on schedule, and the owner was happy. Then my friend went in and presented the guy with the bill. Immediately, the usual excuses started. "Oh, I'm a little short this month. Can I pay you later?" Then my friend pulled out the kicker. Not only did my friend threaten to take all the equipment back and take the station off the air, he revealed that in order to get the uplink working for cheap, someone had to come in every day and code the broadcast manually. It's not a terribly complicated procedure, takes less than 5 minutes, but of course no one else at the station knows how to do it but him. So either the owner can pay him what he's owed, plus a $2,000 per month consulting fee, or the station goes dark and he starts paying the penalty to DirecTV. The owner paid fast. So instead of $15,000, he ended up shelling out more than double that amount as my friend lapped up his $2,000 per month fee for close to a year before he felt bad and finally taught someone there how to do it. Moral of the story: only thinking about short-term gain will always cost you more in the long run. Story 4. So this happened about 1.5 years ago, but I recently heard the news on how far my revenge went. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital, so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer housing. Edit. Found out it's not a private letter. He did actually send it to housing, and most of housing is ran by enlisted members. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments, and each apartment complex is called a tower. For example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers and 2 are for officers, since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military is that crap happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own, and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes in his letter. And yes, this guy has a PhD. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted as an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, drug use, and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There are also sexual assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife, and 2 daughters who are 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable, and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being so commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives in enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea. So this guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are drug users, perverts, criminals, etc. Here's the kicker. He was an enlisted Army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent alcoholics, pervs, drug users, etc. based on your job position, forgetting that some have a family and maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life. Deny days off, make you stay late, write you up if he doesn't like you, and not letting you promote. Safe to say, everyone was pissed, and I have nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I got out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire, but I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of them as trading cards, but they are custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger on the back. On top of that, I designed stickers to show how proud we deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the initial person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So now the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desk. No matter where the officer went during work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, they can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time the military cares is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to Captain's Mast, which is like a Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his criminal offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through paid for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD. And since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one wanted to work with him. Thanks for watching till the end. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more of these ridiculous stories. Love you all and stay safe out there in that crazy world. Much love. Peace.